Okay, so what we have to establish here is that you will need to go in with all of the ones that are marked green because you're a provisional provider, but you have got other things in your general corporate risk register. So let me open it up for you to show you what you need, and maybe you would like to make that decision whether you're going to adapt what you've got to make sure it covers off on what's in here, or whether you're going to go, you know what, we might just keep NDIS as a separate one. So you can make that decision shortly. Okay, so we click on the register. So what's important here is not any of these columns, which is, generic to every single set of standards, which is, the risk, what happens and how can it happen, not the category, not the impact, not the likelihood, not the level of risk. That's what you find everywhere you go, isn't it?
Yeah.
And okay, but what happens here is there's some very specific words in the NDIS standards that say you need a few things, yeah? And if your corporate risk register, even if it identified some really brilliant corporate risk and it didn't include some of these, then they will give you a non-conformity and a major on that, okay? So what it requires is emergency and disaster. I always say to people, if you can't do a minimum of 2, there's something wrong, yeah? So find a minimum of 2 here. Participant related, we're not talking about any, and I know you'll know this, but I'll say it just in case. I know you realise this is not an individual risk assessment. This is a corporate level one. Yep. So they're broad risks. So emergency and disaster must be dealt with. And I say a minimum of 2. And if you find more, well done, because that's even better. We must have a couple of participant related risks completed in here. We also must have, we've got emergency management twice. That's interesting. I don't think you'll find anything else different. I think you probably got, I don't know whether you've got data security managed, but I'll highlight it anyway because I know they can get a bit funky around data security. However, yeah, participant related, emergency and disaster, and all the rest are quite generic, and I'm expecting that you've already got these in your corporate risk register. So you will need to just have a few of them that relate only to your NDIS program, and maybe some of them will relate as clusters to the whole organisation. Some of the NDIS auditors are a little bit funny. Some of them don't really know what they're doing. They've come in from professional jobs, they're probably fantastic RNs or they're fantastic whatever they were, but if they don't have a background in standards, they sometimes tend to take things a little bit literally. So they might not be able to connect the dots that your risk that you've identified for organisational sustainability may already include or factor in the NDIS as well as your other programs. So they may not be able to put that 2 and 2 together because some of them haven't been doing this long enough to be able to know any other set of standards except the one they're facing right now. So you've got to be aware that when you really do deal with these on an NDIS level, so that they don't come back at you. So that might mean including NDIS wording. It might mean just expanding on a particular risk that you've got in your risk register already to include. For example, you're probably under program funding at the moment. You are going into a market where people have to pay you, yeah? So that means making sure you don't have bad debts, making sure not make sure that you don't have them, make sure that you do some prevention methods. You're going to deal with plan managers, you're going to also do billing with the NDIA themselves, and you are going to possibly have at times some people who are self-managed. Self-managed clients, they can be a box of chocolates. You never quite know what you're going to get in terms of the paying and the managing of their statements, etc. So you have to be really aware and have some risks around that financially. Plan managers, most of them are pretty good, but you can get some who are really stuck in the mud and they'll try not to pay something for whatever reason. Also, there could be a client that says, I'm not approving that, and that there's a lot of reasons why that might happen. There might be a valid reason for it. Sometimes an organisation doesn't deliver what they were supposed to, but they want the money anyway. Sometimes an organisation will overcharge, or whether it's by accident or not, and other times there's a lot of fraud. So you can get all sorts of things from the participants if they've asked to be the approver for the plan manager. Yeah. The other thing I would say is that when you are dealing with people who might have quite persevering mental illness, you can also come into all sorts of interesting things. So you've got to be prepared for that. Yeah. All right. So I think that I've outlined the ones that are very, very NDIS specific here. So participant related. Do you need an example? Would you like an example of what that might look like in a corporate risk register?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it could be, if it's participant related, something very specific to your target group. Are you only going to service people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, Australia's First Peoples?
I would have to say no. Just
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so very broadly, you might be looking at one participant risk. I would, from a corporate level, I would perhaps make very exclusively for Australia's First Peoples. So, what is something that can happen on a corporate level that could be, at that corporate level that's going to affect the organisation, and it might be. And I'm just going from my experience in working with organisations such as Scuba Dee Baminga up in the far north Queensland. Mm-hmm. The impact to service delivery and the ability for you to deliver service can often be, this is just an example, that sometimes support workers can't even get in the door unless they're actually another Aboriginal person or someone that they have known so long and they've built that relationship with. So the biggest issue that Goobity had was even getting in the door to deliver the services. So that is a major hurdle for a lot of Aboriginal run services and a lot of services who cater for Aboriginal people, especially the more disadvantaged the population is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So finding the right staff, is it like the risk, is it? Finding the right worker? Yeah,
I think so. I think, if I don't think it's something exclusive to far north Queensland, but I think it might be exacerbated by being in far north Queensland. And so that's one. Now, participant related that is not specific to Australia's First People would be I like this one because I think it sort of puts it on the plate and makes it really obvious that risk assessments are not done or risk assessments are not done correctly. Okay, so I think, and I'm saying that as an auditor because what I see most of all is people not doing risk assessments full stop. Okay, so that is one of the biggest risks you can possibly have. So there's two very broad ones, okay?
Sorry, Gina, can you give me an example of the risk assessment then that NDIS are after? Just an example quickly.
Yep, so when somebody is assessed, here's the way I like to sort of say, well, the other thing I see a lot of is, goodness me. So we have people calling all sorts of forms, intake forms, assessment forms, this form, that form, every other form you want to call it. And what I see is that their intake, they're doing this great long comprehensive assessment with all these fabulous questions in it. And then they've got another comprehensive assessment for onboarding. And it's like, whatever happened to, and the fact is that we know there's so many new people in this sector that they haven't worked in this sector ever. So it's it is a 2 + 2 kind of equals 4 scenario. Intake always meant, even through my academic studies and my experience of 35 years, intake was establishing if the person is right for your organisation. Can you help them? So the most minimal questions possible to establish if you are a good match in terms of you don't do psychosocial disability, they want psychosocial disability supports. Well, it's not going to match, is it? You can't deliver bowel care, they want bowel care. there's an eligibility criteria. You may not be the right organisation for them. Okay, so if we can establish that in a one-pager, and then we are not duplicating these, I see a lot of these two comprehensive kind of, one's an intake, one's a something else. And I go, why are you doing that to the person? Why are you doing that to the carer? Let's not do that. Before the NDIS came in, we decided we would stop the duplication. It is running rampant again, as it was 30 or 40 years ago. Let's stop asking all those questions over and over again. So when we say, so I'm going somewhere with this, so I sort of, rather than just kind of put the Band-Aid on it and hit the risk for you, I'm saying it starts with the assessment. Are they right for you? Do I need to continue? Do I not? Okay, I do. That's great. So let's do the comprehensive assessment. The comprehensive assessment will flag some risks, but to cover off on that, because we have and even if we had everybody experienced, we're all human. So whether inexperienced or experienced, the risk assessment is something that flags a whole bunch of risks which may be irrelevant to the person, but you get prompted. Yeah. And so we're able to identify from a thorough risk assessment, a tick box scenario, whether certain things present as risks for that person. Now, the rules around that are we must have a risk assessment, and I just say thorough, and I use one that, is useful and prompts people to think outside the square about things they've never known because they worked at Optus customer service the day before. Yeah. So it's very useful in that way. So we must do a risk assessment on arrival. We must do a review. These are the rules. We must do a review when a situation changes. And we must do a review at no less than 1 year intervals. Okay. And from that risk assessment, clearly we need to then, and I've seen risk assessments done and then no mitigation strategy or action plan completed. So obviously we do a risk assessment for the risks that we found to be of noteworthy. We do an action plan. And then the final one is, and there's a really good story for that. There was this provider who's doing fantastically. And I remember he was going to his first midterm or re-registration audit. And I said, I'd done an internal audit and said, you've got absolutely no risk assessments. There's no risk assessments for anybody. And he had 150 clients. And I said, so you've got to do the risk assessment. You've got to put them in the participant risk register. And yep. He came back night before the audit and he said, look, boss, I've done all these, and they were perfect. He'd done these perfect risk assessments and there was 150 of them. And I said, okay, why aren't they in the risk register? And he said, because they're all in their folders. And I went, oh, okay. So what you're saying is that on a weekly basis, you'll go through those folders and you'll figure out who's due for their review, on a weekly basis. And you went, oh, that's what that register's for, isn't it? Just show the dates and have an awareness of who's got the high risk and the low risk. Yes. So that's the requirement under risk. Okay. Must be done on arrival. On onboarding, must have an action plan, must be changed if situation changes, and your policy will confirm that for you and guide you, and it must be reviewed at no less than annually. But most people's risk assessments are reviewed more than that, but some people are quite stable in their risks and may not need to. So not having that risk assessment, number one, results in major non-conformities. Number two, can and probably will result in incidents and harm to the participant and harm to staff as well. So it's a wonderful risk to have in there. Make sense?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
So that was the long answer, but it's really hard to give the short answer and make sure I've given you the whole story.
No, that's great. I just wanted to confirm if it was any different to what we're currently doing. Just to confirm.
And is it any different to what you're currently doing?
Not really, no. Just we don't, obviously the clients that we currently have aren't really in our services for 12 months. So
right. So now they will be. Yeah. So that's a bit different. So and the risk register part of it, the registers. So if we just think about these registers, and I'm probably telling you something you already know. These registers are a helicopter looking down on the service. These are not the individual, client files and everything else. This is so you can say, I have oversight of all that's going on there by looking at the dates, because it's the most important thing, the date for review on most of these things. I get to see the level of risk on most of these things, whether it's the corporate risk register or whether it's the participant register, which I'll just click on. So we'll go to the participant risk register. It's the same theory. It says a very short snapshot. So you don't have to go to 150 files. Yeah. You have a snapshot. You can print this out. You know, you've got 10 clients, you've got an aggregated list of their risks with their review dates, just with a tiny little bit of information on there. And you can print that out and make it a weekly thing that you give that to your support workers. You know, it's designed so that it's not just there to sit there, or it's not just there to sit there for oversight. You can actually use it as a working document that you give to your support workers to be able to be aware of them. Because if they don't know, like, it's so much of the time we see support workers not even told about the risk. How can they manage a risk if they're not told about it? We must have a dissemination process, and this can be your dissemination process. There's nothing in here that a support worker shouldn't know. I've even come across a support coordinator once who was working. She was incredibly egotistic, and the SIL organisation, who were trying desperately to work with some very difficult behaviours, and one of the clients had a behaviour support plan with a restrictive practice, and they told the SIL organisation, "Oh no, that's too complicated for you. We're not going to give you that." And I said, "You tell that organisation right now, that support coordinator, it says in the legislation that they must have the behaviour support plan." I mean, just the sheer ego of someone to keep a behaviour support plan from a provider that is working 24/7 with someone. I can't think of a bigger risk than that. I really can't. So, yeah, you get some funny things out there. So we really must, give our support workers all that we possibly can. There's nothing in those columns that's complicated or too complicated for a support worker to understand. So back to our directory. So we've got corporate risk. So you know what to do there. So you may not use this for NDIS. You may add it to your other program. Now, what I will tell you is, you don't want to give things to the auditor that you don't have to, because they can't help themselves. And in fact, sometimes, even as an auditor too, sometimes when I'm given something and I think that is way more than I need, and I can see it's about another program, but now that I've just seen something that really frightens me, now I'm going to have to say something. Yeah. So my suggestion is maybe don't give them everything else. Yeah. Okay. Because some have been around for a long time and know exactly what they're doing, and others came in yesterday, and they are just, it is awful when you get a whole bunch of new auditors. And it impacts on the client, you guys, providers. It impacts on you guys. So that would be my suggestion. Think about that and see what works for you. So back to here. The next one is the disaster and emergency drills. So we had changes in December, and disaster and emergency and mealtime management was added to our core module. And disaster and emergency drills are now necessary, as is a disaster and emergency plan. I do give you a template for that. It's got a lot of information, but I really need you to customize it to your state, your geography, your the type of service that you have. I cannot give one that is 100% accurate to every single provider. What someone needs in far north Queensland with a cyclone is going to be different to what somebody needs in some of the Hunter Valley, Wollombi in the Hunter Valley that seems to be flooding at the drop of a hat, different needs. So I need you to make it your own. But coming to once again, that's the plan. So there's a policy, there's a plan, and there's some forms that support you for that. The disaster and emergency drill is really a helicopter view of who's going to be doing the drills, what are the gaps found, and when was it completed, when is our next one due? Makes sense? So it's that monitoring. This is our corporate monitoring, our governance, our risk and governance standard, which is we actually have an entire division in the NDIS standards. There's Division 1, rights and responsibilities. There's Division 2, governance and operational management. And Division 2 is the one that speaks to all of the governance and operations and management facets of the organisation. So this register sits very squarely in Division 2, governance, operational management, risk, compliance, all of that. Yep. So this is about having, they're going to ask you, you know, what do you do about drills? And so you'll need to complete this. So disaster response process, we need to see that you've, you know, that you've nominated a fire warden, that you've nominated a first aid warden, that you've nominated your emergency coordination person. Those things will probably need to be, I think, from memory, or also reflected in my disaster and emergency plan, but also in your business continuity plan as well. Yeah. And there's templates for those as well. So really, it's not asking an enormous amount. There's training, and I will give your key people, you guys and whoever your key people are, if you send me full names and email addresses of them, access to that training. Now, everything that appears in this register has to have a piece of evidence to back it up. Yeah, so I can see Warren nodding and he gets it. That's wonderful. I did have some clients once, it was a little bit funny. And they wrote a whole lot of stuff, and then the auditor said, where are they? And they went, oh, they don't exist. I thought, oh, guys, that's not how it works. That was really funny. Person-centered emergency preparedness plan. Now, this is part of the, it all came in with COVID, really. But now we've got such extreme weather patterns, it's not going anywhere either, you know. So not only do we have we have an organisational emergency and disaster plan, but we also need now to have a person-centred emergency preparedness plan for every person. There are two in your package that you'll get. One is for supported independent living, anyone who is in your accommodation for whom you are looking after. Yeah, if you have them in accommodation, you will need to use the more specific one for SIL. And if it's just a community access, like they're not living in your accommodation, there's a brief one. Okay.
What if they're living in crisis accommodation?
Not yours, not your accommodation.
Well, it's under like housing, like the government housing, and that we provide obviously the support at our program there, but it's for people that have come off the street and they're there for 12 weeks, whatever, and then go into the other housing that would be more theirs.
So the way to determine whether you have a responsibility for the larger, more comprehensive person, the PCEPP, is to say, if something goes wrong in this house, will I be held responsibility for what happens to that person? Fire, electricity outage, flood, all of that.
Okay, yeah, that means that we would,
Lots of fun. So you won't have to get those ready though, because you don't have a client, unless you do when the time comes. So touching on a whole lot of things here, mealtime management. Well, if you've got no clients, you won't need to worry about that at this point. There are certain groups of service that if you've chosen them, mealtime management becomes relevant to you. Not whether you've got a client that needs it, but if you've chosen a registration group, and one of them is the personal care one, another one is outings in the community, so community access stuff, and group activities, because those three things say that at some point I'm going to come in contact with this person eating. And if this person has a problem such as, at its extreme, dysphagia, and down the other end, diabetes and anaphylaxis and things like that. So there's been such a non-event of people watching what people are eating, and that it's, been quite detrimental to clients. So You will be requiring that because of your registration groups that you'll be going for. So you will need to understand it, and although you've got no client requiring it at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll also put that in your package, of course, just so you understand the fundamentals of it. Medication review. Obviously, it won't matter for you right now, but the reason for it is that when we've got people on a lot of medications, it matters, and it puts them into a complex area. It's been ignored, and it's been ignored a lot because people haven't known what they're doing. They're not necessarily from a health and human service sector, and so they haven't known what they haven't known. So we really need to really get serious about the report, a report that came out. This is why the standards changed back in December. We need to get really serious about the quality of life that people are having under NDIS service provision from many service providers who don't know what they're doing. We really need to start to bring into the awareness, things like this to watch out for. Do they have a diagnosed mental illness? No. But are they on an antipsychotic? Yes. Well, that's a red flag, isn't it? That means that antipsychotic is managing their behaviour. Yeah, so we need to be really, really aware of these things. So many people without mental illness diagnoses being given so many drugs. Yeah. So we're not saying that it has to, that, we have the ability to change that, but we have the ability to be aware of it, and we have the responsibility to say, just get the doctor to write something, please, and say, why are we giving this medication? Now, some doctors will say, oh, I'm not getting involved with that. And then you should say, well, why should you give that responsibility to my support worker to be giving either a Schedule 8 drug or an antipsychotic to someone, but you don't want to say why? We need to hold them to account for that, because if the doctor doesn't want to fill out what's called a clarification of purpose form, which you have in your package, then there's something wrong, isn't there? If they're not prepared to say why that person is being given a PRN antipsychotic or a PRN Valium, there's something wrong. If they don't want to say it, they want to protect themselves. That's not very fair, and it's not right. So needing to know those things, because you're going to see, quite a bit of that in the NDIS. And oral health, needless to say that people's oral health will determine their nutrition, and it will determine their health long term, and it hasn't been cared for in supported accommodation, and it needs to start being cared for. Also, the overall giving of something called, which preceded the NDIS but got lost until this report came out in December, there is something called a comprehensive health assessment plan, a CHAP for short. And so there is a module in here for recording that CHAP and when it's been done. It's simply a form that the support worker takes to the client's doctor, and the doctor fills it out in discussion with, what are this person's health issues, et cetera, et cetera. Might be a family member that comes, it might be just the support worker, who knows. But it's something that is just implemented by your organisation, just following the directions of the GP. It might say dental appointments twice a year, and, podiatrist or physio or this or that. Someone somewhere has to start managing and caring for the person's health that's sitting in the 24/7 service. So there you go. You've got your usual complaint management register. Now, the only reason I put that there, you're not going to have any complaints from NDIS, even if it's staff. You're just not going to have any because you haven't got any staff. Now, the key decision and cost log, that is only useful for small organisations that don't have staff meetings. Do you have staff meetings where you can record certain aspects of service delivery, governance, etc., where you were able to record conversations and actions? You do.
Yeah.
You do? So you don't need to fill that out. That really is for small organisations who are just not big enough yet to have I was just trying to put a strike through in it, but I might just, so I'll just hide it for you. But you won't need it. Next one down. This is really important. If you have another way of presenting your delegations for NDIS, then by all means use it. If you've got a broader one that you already have, then use it. I would suggest that you customize, remove things that may not apply. All of these, so what we have is, you can have a policy on delegations, but it's still going to have a table. So I decided to really just have a table, you know. So you've got the person at the top, person down, don't leave, I'm sure you won't, but don't leave plan B. And somebody went to audit with A, B and C in here. It was quite funny. So CEO, next one down, next one down, next one down. So it is about that plan B. It is about what happens when the person who's making the decisions for NDIS is not there. If they get run over by a bus, who's going to do what? Now, this has got a very, it is actually when I worked for not-for-profit. So I was a CEO and I designed this when I was in a not-for-profit, so it might suit you. But down here in the service one, you need to write the headlines for the service management of the NDIS, okay? So the headlines, who's first in line and who will take over, who gets to act, you know, which other people may be able to take on those particular activities. So it might look like this, ensure all intake activities are monitored and monitored daily, or something like that. And then the next one might be, you know, undertake comprehensive assessment, risk assessment of participant before onboarded to service. Yeah, something like that. Please feel free to add more. And yeah, then, you know, who's the primary person responsible for that? So it might be CEO is not responsible for that, but let's just say the NDIS manager is responsible for that. So it'll be, you know, maybe no for CEO and yes. Okay. So please change that. Feel free to change that however you need. Back to the directory. You'll be any training that any of the NDIS related staff have had. So you would put them in this. This is where you sort of keep a list of their training. But some of the training I'm going to give you is mandatory stuff anyway. So we have a special place for that, which is called the HR matrix, which I'll show you right now. This is a really key document. So Bob the worker, let's say he's a nurse. Therefore, he must have an APRA registration. Let's say Billy is a social worker. So he'll have a, you know, Australian social workers, can't remember the name, registration. And then you've got a whole lot of support workers. They don't have to have a professional body. They might, but they don't have to. But this is where anyone that you are employing that must have a professional body, they cannot work without it, where you list the date that their registration is valid to. Yeah, they will look at the registration. They will look up people on APRA. We always look up people on APRA, and for the others that we can't get access to, we will ask to see the document, so that we can ensure that they are validly practicing as, you know, whatever it is they are. So along the line, if you follow along, and when there is no Nothing, you can just leave it blank. Where it says do not enter data into a column, if you do, you will ruin the formula. So try not to. I had one person who kept on giving it back to me, and I thought, oh no, you just can't help yourself. You just keep putting data in this column, and it just completely voids the formula. So no data where it says no data. And so you'll need working with children checks if you're working with children. Yeah. So mind you, my policies reflect what I used to do, which was I made everybody get a working with children check. So if you don't want to make everybody get a working with children check, then get rid of it. But from my view, it was easier to make everyone have it than to figure out all the time and risk mistakes for who should, who shouldn't. That just was too big a system. So police checks, and then you've got your police checks. Police checks, there is no particular, there is no real expiry date on a police check. But if I say to people, you know, most people sort of go for 2 years, then I also say to people, isn't it funny, the taxi industry and the Uber industry, they have every year, and I don't know why we don't, you know, but it's up to you. First aid certificate is a must for every single worker. And then I've separated that so in case people have CPR instead. I don't think people, like, we don't turn anyone down who doesn't have first aid. You'd have to have a pretty fussy auditor not to. We would, if they've got CPR, that's acceptable for most of us. Nothing's in writing that says that, but most of us are pretty good about that. Because in essence, it is actually the CPR that we're really more, you know, making sure that people know how to deal with someone who stops breathing. Or worker orientation module. Have you all done that on the Commission's website? That's okay, it'll come in your package anyway. I have a gateway to it. Nobody can work in the NDIS, even as an admin worker, without having done that, okay? Worker screening, you're gonna love it. We all love it. It takes you right through to an entire worker screening page. This is and I don't do this because I thought it was a good idea. I do this because this is what the auditors want to see, yeah? So back to the HR matrix. Now, talking about your worker screening, have you guys got yourself a unregistered provider worker screening ID?
No.
Okay, so you'll need to start doing that. I'm going to give you 2 checklists as well, and I want you to start working through those checklists, and it will give you a page to go to read about how to get your, If you've got the proof that you've applied for them, you won't get into any strife at audit. But if you rock up without even the application, then you will. Yeah, that will hold back your application, is what I'm saying, if you haven't at least applied. So these are the mandatory things that I was talking about. It's why they're not appearing on that professional development one, because it is mandatory to do infection control and do it annually. It is mandatory to do emergency and disaster training and annually.
Sorry, Gina, what was that last one that you said we had to apply for that's mandatory? What was it called?
The NDIS have their own worker screening database now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there'll be a link on the 2 checklists I give you. You're going to hate the whole process. Everybody does. It's just like knocking on one door only to be told to go to another one. And then, you know, it depends on who you get on the day, but you'll be South Australia. So the NDIS Commission, they hold the database, but every state is the one that you apply to. So for example, and it's different for every state, but you will find it if you go to the link I give you. So for example, it is the Roads and Maritime, or Service New South Wales, I should say, who do the applications for worker screening in New South Wales, but they only do the application process. The database is held by the NDIS Commission, and it's a far more comprehensive worker screening. So not only does it involve any court or any crimes or etc. But it also holds information about worker conduct. So what we want to be doing is spreading the word about who is behaving badly so that you can have a choice as whether you want to hire them or not. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it just has, you know, there are obviously some people working out there who have less than desirable skills, I suppose.
Well, that's a good thing then, we can see that.
Yes, you will. You'll be able to see. And so the same goes for when you have that sort of experience with someone where somebody is abusive to a client, and you it's not the first time. That's the sort of thing the worker screening database would want to know about.
Okay.
Yeah. And these will be all things that you will get in that package. Now, probably if you're working in the office, manual handling won't be so important for you, but it certainly is for your staff. Complaints, number of you must list your COVID vaccination number, how many people have had, and then of course, just a reminder, make sure you've got the evidence for everything in here, everything. So it's quite an extensive human resource requirement. And then, of course, once you get to the worker screening stage, you'll be filling out all of this information. For now, you would be wanting to put it really works more about the title. So it's the title of the role and whether it's risk assessed. And you can read about that. I mean, being risk assessed is, are you going to be working or interfacing with clients or vulnerable people? And every position that you have that does that needs to be marked as a risk assessed role. Yeah. The policy does talk about it quite well. Back to here. So then you've got, here's an easy one. You'll just love this. This is easy. This is where you're just going to list the name of every policy that you're going to be given and propose a review date for them. Yep. Okay. Now, when you put the same date in every one, we do tend to think that, we do tend to think you're bitten off a little bit more than you can chew. So you'll probably get a comment from that. Next one is the next two big ones. So the HR matrix is big. The corporate risk register is big. Conflict of interest. You've got no staff, so you'll probably have minimum conflict of interest at this point. But what we have mostly in the NDIS is we have a lot of people support workers who work for other support workers, for other support providers. Yeah. And the conflict of interest needs to be declared in a conflict of interest form, discussed, and then written up in a helicopter view register because of the data breaches that occur. Unfortunately, support workers find it really hard to know not to talk about other people when they go to other jobs. So you really need to bring that out. You may have other conflicts of interest that you know of amongst yourselves. You know, that might be that, you know, you're all family, you know, all three of you are family. And so that would be something you'd need to declare. So whatever other conflicts of interest you can think of, do nut them out here. Conflict ninjas, policy review schedule. Here's some. Okay, so I've separated the regulatory compliance monitoring. Now, look, you may have a software that does this one for you. If you do, you don't need to repeat it. But if it can't give you the monitoring oversight that you really need, then use it. Yeah. So regulatory compliance for insurances. So you'd already have these. I'm sure you've got a not-for-profit package, which will include public liability, professional indemnity. You've probably got directors or managers liability.
Yeah. No.
Public liability. Yeah.
Yes, we do. We do have public liability.
This usually comes in a package, and then you'll want, you know, you'll have workers' comp. Just need to show that you've included the potentiality for the NDIS to be a part of that. And then now this probably won't be what you want to do as a not-for-profit, but a lot of people are now support workers are working under their ABN. They like to be self-employed. And if that's the way they want, because they've got to have several jobs, and people don't want to be taxed that level of tax for all the hard work they do for having a second job or a third job or a fourth job. So they're working under their ABN a lot. So, and if they do, they need to show you their public liability, their professional indemnity, and their accident or injury insurance. Okay, so that's all around the business insurances. And then if we go back to come back to the vehicle, and the vehicle's really important because it's the tool that people use to get where they need to get to do the work they're going to do. So here, for all of you, anyone who's working NDIS program, if you're using your vehicle for that, you need to put the vehicle details in there. Any vehicles that your organisation owns that will be used for NDIS need to be there, and any of your support workers or managers who are using their own vehicle need to be listed here. And the most important thing is ensuring that you're monitoring their registration dates. Because it's probably one of the most common things. What happened? I didn't do anything there. It's probably one of the most, I did not do a thing. What happened? It's probably one of the most common things that we see is that people's registrations have expired and the organisation has not monitored it, okay? Also, their insurances, some haven't had an insurance. People say, well, what am I supposed to do? Is it supposed to be comprehensive or third party? My advice is if somebody's car is only worth having third party, I wouldn't want a client getting in it. I don't think it's a good look, okay? So if they're just doing that because, like I've seen some dreadful cars that we just should not be paying clients in. So if they're doing it because they don't have enough money and they have a decent car, but they don't want to pay the comprehensive, I just want you to think about what will happen if they do have their vehicle written off and they don't have a car and they won't get insurance paid and they can come back and have a go at you legally. So I always look at it from an employer point of view. Do I really want that trouble? And, and do I really, does that person know what's good for them in terms of, I know they don't want to pay for more than their third party, but is that sensible that I don't sort of suggest that maybe they can find a cheaper comprehensive or, because that is their livelihood and it's not going to be happy days if they write their car off, is it? And sometimes an organisation can get a really good group deal, for all of their staff. If you're going to end up with 20 or 30 support workers and many of them are going to use their own cars, you can probably negotiate a really good group deal through one of the brokers or insurers. Yep. So that pretty much touches on all the things that you need to have. As far as you guys go, are you the only staff associated with NDIS at this point, or are there more?
Just us for now, but the managers are aware and the process is happening right now.
Okay, so you guys would need to be listed in the HR, as staff. And what else? That's all for that kind of practical stuff that you need to do, yeah?
Yep.
There's kind of information behind that, but if you can get that done, yep, and I will send you these checklists. I'll just open one up for a second. Just let me just pause my share. And you do have this in your package, but I'm just going to take it out and show it to you. You have a pack, you in your forms and templates, you're going to have the very first folder is called NDIS Commission Prep. I'll just show you right now, actually. I'll just tidy up so you don't see my messy Dropbox. So this is what you're going to see when you get your, can you see?
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
no,
You can see my Dropbox?
no.
No.
Okay, maybe I didn't. I'll do a new share. Yeah. There we go. Can you see this line of folders?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the overall folder name will be NDIS Forms and Templates version 2, and you're going to have all of these folders inside, okay?
Mhm.
And so NDIS Commission Prep has, this is my suggested way to get ready for audit. Because the standards are set out, ACES have their way and NDIS have their way in terms of the way we sort of progress through the audit. It's a lot easier when you can give them identification documents in one batch, key business documents like policies and all the insurance certificates and all of that evidence and everything, and policies and procedures in one, which will be key business. And then governance will be all of your compliance registers, anything related to the compliant register or monitoring of such. So there's a stage 1 checklist. Now your audit's going to happen in 2 stages, unless sometimes for a provisional, an auditor might say, I'm going to do it all at once, but usually it's done in 2 stages, a week apart. Okay. Even if it's all done in one day, it doesn't matter. It's still a stage 1 and a stage 2 just done together. So the stage 1 is simply a desktop audit. Yep. So they're going to be looking through your paperwork and mostly your policies and procedures, and they're going to see if they can identify anything missing or anything that could do with improving. All right. That's a good part. That's why policies get better and better, because they're constantly going through those. So this is your stage 1 checklist. So if you follow through here, if you were to do one for each of you, or or if you can manage just I know I need this for all 3 of you, and etc. etc. It's up to you whether you do a checklist per person. Working with children checks, you'd be across that. You've already got that stuff. Worker
Can't see
screening.
the screen.
You can't see my screen. Oh, it's because it's because I've not shared the entire screen like a silly Billy. Now you can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. NDIS stage 1 audit checklist. So you're going to be collecting all of these. These are the 100 points of ID. Working with children check, you're across that. Your police checks, you'd be across that. Now worker screening will be new for you. So follow that, and may the gods be with you, okay, as you go through that frustrating process. Quals for, you do need to have resumes, quals, and to show reference checks for the people that you're putting forward as NDIS staff, even yourselves, yeah? So we'll be looking for certain things to be in people's folders. Any of you require professional bodies, please provide that. You don't need to worry about this because I'm going to give this to you in that package of training that I'll provide as a complimentary kind of, gift, I suppose. So we need to demonstrate that people have been inducted, and so the certificates that you download will do that, and you putting them into your register will show that you're going to be monitoring those that need to be refreshed annually. I would so follow through, or nothing there that I haven't already said to you. Follow through on the collection of the information and compiling it into your registers, okay? However those registers might look for you, in terms of whether you maintain some of your own or whether you move some of this one over to yours, or etc. So that's your number 1. So we'll just stick with that for now, with the number 1. Yeah. Okay. And so I will start. I'll just my Alison's away until Friday, but then I'll write her a note to ask her to send your policies to you, and the Now you're just going for, no, I just need to check your core module. So what do you happen to remember which modules you're?
I can't remember what we said now, but
I'll check it because I know I've got a copy of it. So we'll send your policies and your forms and templates. Now, the core module does have a little bit of customization that you need to do. It's all on the front page. We want you to go and do this and this and this. We want you to put your, like waste is determined by a council area. So we need you to put some specific area, some specific information to the areas that you live in some cases, etc. So there's a little bit of customization to do, but very little. Okay.
yeah.
What else? Have you got any questions?
We're covering it really good.
Yeah, if I warn you out.
Yep. No. Very complex.
Oh dear.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And just how we can use some of the systems we've already got, because I like the look of all of your templates. They look fantastic. All of
You know what the really good news is? That I've just selected the software that we're going to build that in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I've always wanted it to maintain, the beauty of it has been that it's an Excel spreadsheet and it shows you those lines, right? So I've tried other softwares, but it doesn't retain the Excel look. So I've had a fabulous consultant or colleague consultant who's just spent so much time. He didn't agree with the one I chose. He made me look at other things, and I'm glad he did, because the one we decided on has the form where you put the entry in, but above it, it retains that Excel look. And I think that's the actual beauty of it, is that's the learning tool that you can see how everything starts to, you get one line after the next and you get to see the risk and you get to see this, but it's given to you in the form. And so I'm really excited about that, so that everybody that's ever purchased one of these off me, I'm obviously going to offer them, if they, once it's done, to be able to upgrade to the software one. And of course, why would I want the software? Because it's going to send emails. It's going to have dates that remind you. It's going to have downloadable reports. It's it's just going to make everything automated. So happy about that. So anyway, so let's do it in small chunks. That's your first chunk.
Yeah.
Yay.
Again. It's a lot to take in, but
I know, but you may already have some of these in the rest of your business. And I always say to people, use what you're comfortable with, and the spillover, the stuff you can't record in your own system, then just have that in your compliance register for NDIS. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you so much.
No problem. And I'll also send you that link to the onboarding NDIS staff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem at all. Good to see you all.
Yeah, no, you too.
We'll see you soon.
So what is the next step, Gina? So
I want you to come back to me when you've, I can do it two ways. Sometimes I say, let's make the appointment so that you're stuck on a timeline and you have to, or you can, but you've got a bit of a timeline. If Lisa's suggesting the 9th of December, you've already
it's not actually Lisa, it's me that, pushing her.
You're suggesting, okay. Why don't I say this, because there's only 3 of you, so it is doable. So why don't we say you'll compile that information in a week? Do you reckon you can do that? Or do you want 2 weeks?
We don't have any clients. It's just literally.
You don't have any clients. Easy peasy.
Yeah. Okay.
What would you prefer? We can lock you in right now by making an appointment for a week or fortnight, but you need to make sure you've got that, or there's no point going on to the next stage.
Yeah, no, at least a fortnight, and because we're going to have to get all the special clearances as well that we don't have.
You are, but you don't have to wait for them to come. What you have
okay.
You have to apply for them. That's going to be that isn't going to happen overnight. Yeah.
And how much are they? How much do they cost?
Well, to get your provider ID should cost you nothing, right? Yeah. But each individual worker, and including yourselves, because you'll need it, we pay $80 at Service New South Wales.
Okay.
Yeah. Just another reason for them
to know the approximate, like
$80.
Yeah.
Lots of fun. Lots of fun.
Yes.
So the other thing I was going to say was worker screening. That's just gone from my head. Not to worry, it'll come back. If I think of what it was I was going to say, I'll email it to you. So yeah, don't think that one has to be completed by the time we meet, but collecting all the other stuff is really, really just a task.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to do like 2 weeks then, or 3 weeks?
I mean, like, I say, look, the worst case scenario, we may have to postpone the audit date to January or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's okay. Don't forget, you can always service somebody if you need to, if they're plan managed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because we got so many other things on the plate as well. So I'll probably talk to Lisa and probably postpone it to January.
Yeah.
So mid-January.
I don't want to rush the audit.
No, you don't want to rush it, but yeah, you'll find it easier than you think. I mean, these are all things you've probably already got, and it's just really a matter of ticking them off as I've got them, and have I got them in a place that I'm willing to show the auditor so that they don't see everything else and start critiquing my other programs, sort of things.
Okay. What do you just 100% we're getting that right? Yeah.
Pardon?
I was just making sure that we're buying all this from you so that we have it.
Yeah, absolutely. You get everything. Yeah,
cool.
Everything. Yeah.
All right then.
Yeah. And in the next time, possibly we'll be checking into seeing what you've collected, but also then an orientation to the policies and procedures.
Sure. Cool. Sounds good. Thank you so much. You're really thorough.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See ya, Gina.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.